Hello, I'm Robin Leafblad, and I'm here with Santa Ana College Fire Technology Department, or SAC-FIT, to bring you another installment of fitness and wellness. We're going to be covering high-intensity circuit training, high-intensity interval training, and what circuit training is. So there are exercise extremes, right? I use it as a coat hanger in the garage, and the extreme other end of I live in the gym. Right? So the idea is high-intensity circuit training or interval training kind of finds a middle ground and allows us some variety. So again, moving from getting our clothes off of our fitness equipment in the garage and not quite all the way over to all our life revolving around the gym. So how much exercise should we have, right? ACSM and CDC guidelines recommend moderate intensity of 30 minutes a day, at least 5 days a week, or vigorous intensity, 20 minutes a day for 3 days a week. So which we choose depends on what you have time for. So moderate intensity, right? If I like the routine of exercise and working out and I have 5 days in 7 that I can regularly get that lower intensity or moderate intensity for 30 minutes. If I don't have a lot of time, those high intensity circuits are going to fit more into this vigorous, intense cardio. So 20 minutes a day, so shortening our time in which we have to exercise and also shortening the number of days a week we need. So either of these are one you'd want to choose from. And then they also recommend 8 to 10 strength training exercises, generally in that strength training window of 8 to 12 reps, 2 times a week. So if I'm trying to combine my strength training and my cardio conditioning, going with higher intensity circuits will shorten the number of days. I can do 3 days of that and then include 2 days of strength training. So principles of training, generally what we want to think about is where are you and where do you want to go, right? So we need to know where we are, we need a baseline, and we need to know what is your goal, where do you want to get to. So specific things that we want to do is going to be goal-based. So specific adaptation to implied demand is just that. Your body will adapt to what environment it's in or what loads or stressors are applied to it. So physical tasks you do need to do on the job, right? So the other benefit of circuit training is more of those stations or more of those exercises can be aligned closer to job readiness as opposed to just aesthetics, right? Most of us focus our goals on aesthetics, but the idea is we want our actions to benefit both aesthetics as well as job performance. So which physical tasks do you need to improve on or do better for the job? Intense work with SCBA, right? So that high intensity breathing regulatory may not happen always. Obviously, we're not getting fires every day, but when we do have them, we need the ability to operate at that higher intensity level. Overload, right? In order for our body to adapt or get better, we need to overload it more than where we are. Otherwise, we're either training or we're detraining. So very often are we staying consistent or stalemate if we're not elevating that overload to push the body to do more. One of the best ways to identify a good solid training program is to look at our FIT principle, or frequency, intensity, time, and type, which we'll get into next. So frequency, how often are you working out, right? Going back to the very beginning cartoon, right? We have all the best intentions, but we're not doing it, right? We got the gym equipment, but we can't get to it. So our frequency has to start with what we think we can be successful at. If we're not doing anything, hoping for 6 or 7 days a week of training is probably real unrealistic. So starting with, hey, I have nothing, maybe I can move on to frequency of 2 days a week. The first step of exercise denial is making it impossible to reach your gym equipment, right? So I got it, but I can't get to it. So how often can you realistically do and what are your goals, right? So again, based on shift schedules, based on outside life at home and work and balancing those things, where are you going to try and find that time to work out? Is it mostly on duty? Is it mostly off duty? Where are you going to have the best chance of being successful? 2 days provides health benefits and maintenance, right? So if we're in a phase of life where stuff is just crazy, the minimum should be about 2 days a week, right? I like to try and think of it in terms of your tour or days on, days off. So whatever that shift schedule looks like for you, whether it's 2 on, 4 off, on and off every other day, right? The idea is that if you set your week as your tour, you're going to be a little bit more successful in finding ways to make sure you get those days in. 3 to 4 days a week is generally optimal or right at that threshold of overload, right? So just kind of continuing to move the ball forward. And then 5 or more is going to be specifically for types of goals, whether that be weight loss, whether that be muscle gain, whether that be performance driven, right? We're not going to really see those benefits in 2 or 3 days a week, whereas we will 5. So how many workouts can you get in regularly? Are you doing those on duty or off duty? Generally, I try and recommend having a plug and play scenario. So I have these 4 workouts that are my go-tos, and my hope is I'm going to get these 2 in off duty and then these 2 in on days that work off on duty. If that doesn't work in my normal schedule, or I got forced, or I'm working overtime, or we're at Disneyland with the kids, right? I can move that plug and play workout to another day that makes more sense. So having a consistent plan with a flexible mindset is the best way to be successful in this type of training. So intensity, right? We talked about frequency, how often are we training? Intensity, at what level or threshold are we training, right? Tears in your ears, hair on fire, going hot and hard as you can is good sometimes, but not all the time. And doing just the bare minimum is better than nothing, but again, we need to be overloading that body. So the levels that we're looking at are generally higher intensity or lower intensity. The higher the intensity, the less duration we're able to maintain that. The lower the intensity, the threshold of time in order to maintain that exercise program elevates. Measuring intensity. So this is usually something that's a little bit harder for people to kind of grasp. There's a couple different ways we can do this. Number one, heart rate, right? So a lot of us have wearable technology, whether it be our Apple Watch, or Garmin, Fitbit, Whoop Band, right? Oura Ring. There's all kinds of different things that we can use to measure our heart rate and our heart rate variability. So heart rate is probably the most truest form, right? How we feel versus how we're physically responding are different. I can give you a workout on day 1 of a shift, and it would feel probably like a moderate workout. If I give you that same workout on day 4 or at the end of a 96, that same workout's gonna feel much higher intensity in terms of difficulty. So the idea is if I can use my heart rate, then I can take how I feel out of the equation and do a little bit more scientific assessment as to how I'm doing. So generally that higher intensity, 60 to 80% of your max heart rate. Those of you guys who've done the fitness testing with us should have that max heart rate based on your fitness test and your treadmill time. If you do not or haven't had that max treadmill time done in a while, you can do 220 minus your age would be your estimated max heart rate. So generally that window is going to be 60 to 80% of that heart rate. RPE scale, so rate of perceived exertion, a little bit of a broader concept for most people. Generally those higher intensities are going to be an 8 or a 9 out of 10. Generally, that moderate is going to be somewhere between a 5 and a 7. So a really good way to identify your RPE is I like to use talk test or talk tolerance. We use this in the field with those that are struggling with breathing, right? Can you speak in full sentences? That's going to probably be a low intensity workout. If I can kind of have a relatively streamlined conversation, but I have to take some breaths here and there, probably to be more in that moderate range. And if someone's asking me questions and I'm at peak intensity and I can only give you one word at a time, that's going to be that high intensity. So talk tolerance, right? A really good way to, if your spouse called and needed to have a conversation with you, what would that conversation look like in the middle of your workout? That should be a really good way to identify that intensity. So light activities, generally walking, golfing, swimming slowly, gardening, right? Housework, washing the car, lawn work, bicycling slowly, so leisure activities, right? Those are going to be more on the light end. Again, that 3 to 5 on your RPE scale, or full sentence conversation, right? We're walking down the boardwalk over at PB, and we're able to casually carry on a conversation. Those moderate intensity or activities, walking briskly, right? Hiking, and increasing the elevation. Golfing, but no cart, right? We're walking the whole course. And then swimming, heavy lawn or yard work, heavy cleaning, washing floors and windows, things that take a lot more of that elbow grease. Those are daily activities that are going to be along those moderate activity levels. So again, it's going to be somewhere around that 5 to 7. You may be a little breathy in your conversation, or closer to 4 or 5 words at a time between breaths. And then those hard activities are like, please don't talk to me because I can't now have a conversation with you. You're again going to be at an RP of about 8 or 9. So this would be race walking, jogging, running, any type of increased elevation, like swimming for laps. Tennis singles as opposed to doubles is a little bit slower pace, would be more moderate. Circuit training, CrossFit, those types of things. So hopefully that helps you identify kind of your ranges on light, moderate, and difficult or heavy intensity activities. So now is time. How long should I go? Well, based on what we just heard about with intensity, the intensity drives the time, right? Now, if I'm using time as my driver, then the intensity is going to adjust based on how long that training program is going, right? If I want to go for an hour, that intensity in and of itself is naturally going to drop off. So generally for aerobic training, or training that utilizes oxygen, right? So if I'm looking to train for a marathon or stand-up paddleboarding, that's long distance, right? Those things generally for aerobic training specifically, we want greater than 10 to 30 minutes. Anaerobic is going to be anything that's going to be 20 to 30 minutes in session. So 30 minutes or more, generally we're going to see weight loss. We're going to see high fitness and athletic results, as well as similar to things like wildland fire, longer duration calls, mop up, right? So versus TC on the freeway, right? Or lifting a patient that's very heavy. Those are going to be more anaerobic. Something that's going to take more time, like overhaul or wildland punching in lines, that's going to take a lot longer. That intensity is going to be down. So that's going to be more of your aerobic training. So type, we've talked about how long, right? Frequency, how often, how intense, how long those durations are going to be, and then what are we going to choose? Generally, I recommend picking things you like. I equate exercise to vegetables. So stick with what you like, you'll do it more often. So in anaerobic and aerobic, right, there's different areas that we're looking at. So aerobic, generally those are going to be large muscle groups, so more cardiovascular. It's going to be walking, running, cycling, swimming. It just depends on what you're training for, right? We want our training capacity to match what it is that we're looking for our goal to be. Anaerobic is without oxygen, generally is going to be our phosphocreatine system or our lactic acid system. So generally is going to be more useful with any exercise like weightlifting, sports like soccer, hockey, baseball, right? Things that are short sprints, but also playing the duration of the game, or things that are just in and of themselves like one-time efforts, right? So something like football being on the line, or shot put in track, or weightlifting where it's just one maximal effort. So depends on what it is we're trying to train for. If I'm looking to get better at throwing a ladder, that's kind of more one maximal effort, as opposed to being able to sustain pulling hose for a prolonged period of time in turnouts, right? That'd be more aerobic. So it's job specific as well. Fitness training, cardiovascular training. So we're trying to train that cardiovascular system. There's several different ways we can do this. We have continuous, we have circuits, we have intervals, and we have fartlek, which is kind of a speed play type of training. So generally the two most confused are going to be circuit and interval. These two are kind of tend to be used interchangeably, and they are slightly different, so we'll go over those details. So continuous, generally maintain a hard to somewhat difficult intensity throughout the session, right? So it's just a lot of times in CrossFit, we would call this a chipper. There's a laundry list of things we have to do, and we're going to do it in a set amount of time. Examples, right? I want to run 10 miles, right? That's just going to be continuous. In our cardio type exercises like running, swimming, and cycling, that would be what we would call monostructural, or long, slow, steady pace, right? Intervals, well, I'll start with circuits. Circuits are continuous activity, generally set up in stations. So we're going to go from station to station or exercise to exercise. Usually we recommend picking 10 to 20 different exercises. So we may do 8 and then do that twice. That would give me 16 stations, right, of varying muscle groups. We often recommend varying your muscle groups from like upper to lower or back to front. That way we're getting a good balanced routine with that circuit training. And you can do the circuit training based on reps, or you can do the circuit training based on time. So I may have 10 exercises and I want to do 30 seconds at each exercise, right? 30 seconds at 10 stations gives me 5 minutes of work. Benefit of circuit training is we're able to really kind of carve out, okay, I have a very limited amount of time. What can I get done in that time because I have a timed rotation? Generally, we're going to see this more with lifting techniques, calisthenics, and cardiovascular training. Now, the difference or the pivot in interval training is with circuit training, if we did it for time, there's a set time for that station, but there's no set rest period. So I could take all the time I want to get to the next station, or if I'm set for reps, I'm doing 10 reps at every station, right? I'm going to adjust and rest as needed until I feel like I can give that next station my maximal effort. The difference with interval training is there's a work period and there's a rest period. So it's very specific and very specific and ideal way to target different energy systems based on what your goals are. We'll talk a little bit more about intervals in a minute, but some of the advantages are you're going to get more total work done in the same amount of time, less time required for the same activity. Also, we're able to work not only our ultimate or overall cardiovascular fitness, but also our recoverability, right? So more of that continuous and circuit training is going to get me stronger heart and lung wise, but I'm not necessarily going to recover from those higher intensities as quickly. Interval training trains both those, that over the higher level of cardiovascular training that I'm gaining, but it also helps me recover quicker from those high bouts of exercise. And then fartlek is a different type of interval or circuit training, similar to intervals. Generally is going to be a mix of high and low intensity. For anybody that ever did one of these in PE or with a sport, right? You all line up and everybody starts running together, and the person in the back sprints to the front, and everybody keeps running, and then the person in the back sprints to the front. That's a type of fartlek or speed play type of training. If you don't have a giant team to run with and you want to do this style of training, you can pick landmarks along your run. So very similar or very common is like light poles. I'm going to run 5 miles, and from light pole to light pole, I'm going to sprint. And then the next set of light poles, I'm going to jog. And then the next light pole, I'm going to sprint. Next light pole, I'm going to jog. Now, if I'm on a track, a really easy one is what we call curves and straights. I'm going to sprint the straight part of the track, and then I'm going to jog as slow as I want around the curves, right? So we're just changing up the gears or changing up the speed in which I know I can continually navigate. Interval training, series of repeated bouts of exercise, alternated with periods of recovery. There's no set time on that recovery. You're just taking your time from station to station. Generally with the interval training, light or mild exercise usually constitutes the recovery. So if I'm not in shape or I'm just getting started, right, my sprint may be 4.5 on the treadmill. And then my recovery may be standing. As I get more fit, eventually my sprint's going to be a 7 and my recovery is now that 4.5. So it just is relative to where you are in your training program as to what that sprint or hard effort looks like and what that moderate effort looks like. When we look at interval training, we look generally at setting up one of these various work to rest ratios. So again, interval training has a work period and also has a rest period. So a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio would be however long I work. If that's 30 seconds, then I rest for 30 seconds. Work for 30, rest for 30, right? So it's a 1-to-1 work rest ratio. If I move on to the 1-to-2, now I'm working for 30 seconds, but I'm resting double, so now I'm going to rest a minute. Work for 30, rest a minute. The next one's going to be 1-to-3, so work for 30, rest 90 seconds or a minute and a half. So this same 30 seconds of work, because the rest time is increasing, allows me to increase the intensity of the same 30 seconds, right? If I only have 30 seconds to recover, that 30 seconds of work isn't going to be as intense, maybe around a 5 or a 6. But if I'm getting triple the recovery in that 1-to-3 ratio, I'm getting all this extra rest. My intensity of the same 30 seconds can now be up into that 7, 8, or 9, right? So the more rest we get, the more intensity we can drive on the work portion. Now that's going to play into what energy system we're training. The one at the bottom, the 2-to-1, is going to be a negative work to rest ratio. If you're familiar with Tabata, this is Tabata. So we work for 20 seconds, we rest for 10. Very efficient and fast way to increase your cardiovascular training. However, the wheels come off the cart real quickly with this type of training if you're not familiar. So you're going to do 8 rounds of 20 on, 10 off. That's 1 Tabata. Also only equals 4 minutes. So you're going to get a whole lot of work done in a very short amount of time, but the goal is trying to sustain that effort across all 8 sets. Interval training, so we have aerobic and anaerobic. Generally, those ratios that are 1-to-1, 2-to-1, and 3-to-1 are going to target more of our aerobic system. So that's our energy system that we utilize oxygen to burn, or generally is driven by carbohydrate use. So if I'm trying to train for a marathon or an Ironman and I'm at the station, there's no way I'm going to be able to run 20 miles for a training session. So a more appropriate thing I can do is set up an interval, and maybe I do 20 minutes of 1 minute on, 1 minute off sprints, right? So I'm going to cover a lot more distance than I just ran 20 minutes straight. So for on-duty activities that you're really trying to target an aerobic outcome, this is going to be a better approach. And the bonus round, or the bonus aspect, is that we also get the recoverability on the side that the job needs, right? So it's important to be able to have that cardio piece, but for the job itself, it's really important that we're able to recover and bring that heart rate down so that we can do repeated bouts. Anaerobic is going to be more of that power output or non-oxygenated energy drive. So work intervals generally are going to be that 1-to-3 or 1-to-6. And you're going to see that the rest interval is active low intensity, right? So we have a longer rest period, which means it's going to be a lower intensity activity to recover from. These intensities are going to be much higher because we have so much time to recover. Program development. Now it's like, okay, I get it. This sounds like a good plan. Sounds like a big 2-for-1. I'm a big 2-for-1, 3-for-1. If I can do the same workout and get all the things covered rather than have to do 3 separate workouts, I'm in. So I'm getting cardio, I'm getting recovery, I'm getting functional movement, and I'm benefiting my job and my hobby. I'm in. Now it's how do I program it? So program development for intervals, generally you will have to choose an activity you like. Again, going back to that vegetable idea, pick what you like, you're more likely to do it longer. Determine your goal, right? So we have to be specific with that. Is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it attainable? Is it realistic? And what is your time frame, right? So make it a SMART goal. And then which energy system really drives that goal? Is it anaerobic or aerobic? Based on those key pieces, then I can design my interval program correctly. So variables generally are going to be number of repetitions or work intervals. How many intervals am I going to have? How much time do you have? If I have 20 minutes, and each interval is 2 minutes, that means I can do 10 rounds, right? So the beauty of intervals is it just comes down to basic math as to what can I get done in the amount of time I have. Intensity and duration of workload, generally what exercise you pick may drive that, or the length in which your intervals are will also drive that. Intensity and duration of the rest interval, right? So work interval will dictate rest interval, or if I'm choosing my rest interval first, that's going to dictate my work interval. Again, activity during the rest, right? Am I doing nothing or am I doing an active movement, right? Between a weight circuit or weight intervals, am I doing planks? Am I doing core? Frequency of interval training per week, right? Generally recommend if you're not really focusing on a specific plan or don't have any specific outlying goals that you're working on, for most tactical athletes, I highly recommend 1 day of long steady state or that slow pace running, so more of those continuous cardio pieces. 2 days of this higher intensity circuit training or high intensity interval training, and then 1 day of that heavier strength training. So getting an average of 4 days, you can do 1 of each or 1 slow steady, 1 strength, and 2 of these interval training days. And that should give you a really well-rounded approach and also hit that aesthetic piece you're looking for. So here's some sample workouts. You guys can see we've got our warm-up, about 5 minutes. So whatever that may be, whether it's jump on a treadmill, whether it's dynamic activity, right? Getting ready should be conversational pace. So you can kind of see we have what are we doing in the interval? How long is that going to be? What intensity is it going to be at? Again, you can ask yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, how hard are you? If you're over where you need to be, you can throttle it back. If you're under where you need to be, you can increase the intensity. And then here's that talk tolerance. Where are we at? So for example, in this training, we're going to do our first interval is going to be 3 minutes of work at a moderate, about 3 or 4. And I should be able to do 2 to 3 words if somebody had to ask me a question. I'm going to rest for the same amount of time. So this is a 1-to-1. It's going to be nice and light. So maybe I was jogging and then I walk. 2 to 3. Once I'm walking, I should be able to have full sentence conversation. Our next interval is going to be 2 minutes of work. It's going to be extremely hard. I'm going to be about a 5 or a 6, and I should only be able to speak 1 to 2 words. That recovery then for this round is going to be half the time, right? So we're definitely working on that aerobic capacity. Again, it's going to be really light, right? So maybe I did a 400 easy, walked 200, did a 200 as hard as I could, and then walked 200 again, did a 200 as hard as I could, walked again, right? So you can see the change in intensity, right? Also the change in RPE or what I can and can't say. So it's a really good way to kind of outline what you can do. And then all it is math at the end. I add all these up and it's like, yeah, this fits in my time frame, or maybe I take one of these out so it will fit in my time frame. Really easy to get a good amount of work done in a short amount of time. Again, those can be running, those can be weight stations, right? We can talk a lot about different variables, but here's another one and where we're specifically using heart rate. So last one was RPE and talk tolerance. This is going to be specifically using heart rates. Very common with runners, right? So especially for tempo runs. Tempo runs meaning I'm trying to hit a specific heart rate intensity for these particular runs. So all of the runs are going to be set for a certain amount of time. You can see this is kind of descending order. So we have, again, our warm-up, nice and easy, and then minute 1's 5 minutes, minute 2 is 5 minutes, then we drop to 4 for 2 minutes, then we drop to 3 for 2 minutes, then 2, and then 1. So obviously our length or duration decreases, right? And then our intensity also follows that. So our first 5 minutes is going to be at a higher intensity. But then when we go to that second 5 minutes, right, this is going to be our recovery. So 65% as opposed to 85%. Then we go 1 to 1, we're working at 85%, we cut it back to 65%. 3 minutes, same thing, 85-65, 2 minutes, 85-65, and then 1 minute, 85-65. A lot of times your time that you are running for if you're doing running, you're going to know your pace, right? So how far I can get in 5 minutes, how far I can get in 4, etc. Now, if we're doing weights, then this is going to be more, okay, how many reps did I get in that amount of time, right? For example, push-ups. We'll go to the 1 minute scenario. So how many push-ups, if you went max effort, could you do in a minute? Let's say 75 push-ups. But I wouldn't be able to repeat that. So if I'm going at 85%, maybe I'm somewhere around 50 push-ups. And then if I'm down to 65%, then that next minute's going to be maybe 30 push-ups, right? So you can kind of see how we're fluctuating based on the time, okay? So circuit training, going back to the just doing stations and there isn't a specific rest interval, right? Again, we can just get a laundry list of exercises or activities and go station to station and make sure we get a really well-balanced training program. So short bursts of resistance exercise followed quickly by another burst of exercise. You're going to see this a little bit more in terms of, or think about it a little bit more in terms of like CrossFit, or CrossFit style working out. Right, I have 5 different exercises. I'm going to do 20 of this, 10 of this, 5 of this, 1 of this, and start over and do as many rounds as I can. Generally, it's going to be moderate weights, right? This isn't going to be our maximal effort because we're repeating and going for an extended period of time. And then we're going to see frequent repetitions. Generally, minimal wet rest is required, right? If I'm taking 5 minutes between stations, then we're just going to call it a strength training program. So the idea is to keep moving from station to station. You're going to see an elevated or increased heart rate throughout the entire workout. And then we can incorporate strength training strategies and tactics, which is just not going to be at the maximal strength end of the spectrum. Generally, circuit's a really good way to kind of keep yourself honest and make better use of your time, as opposed to, hey, I have all day to be in the weight room and I'm going to just take my time and go through what I need to go through. So really beneficial way for those that are short on time to get done what you need to get done and have a well-rounded program. So some variables of circuit training, generally the length of the interval between circuits, right? So maybe I do run round and then rest 5 minutes and then I do another round. Number of circuits performed, how many times do I go through that circuit of exercises? Number of exercises I have, right? If I have 10 stations versus 5 stations, right, then that's going to be a little bit more intense. If I have 10 stations, maybe I can only go through twice. If I have 5 stations, I may be able to go through 4 times. Both is going to be basically 20 stations overall total. I could probably do more intensity on the less when we only have 5. So it just kind of depends on what your goal is, what your time frame is, and what it is that you really want to execute for the day. So the next piece that we're going to talk about is time spent with each exercise. So if I do 50 reps of burpees, that's a long period of time to do one exercise, as opposed to if I'm only doing 5 every station, right? So how long you plan to spend on that routine. Sometimes it may be something that takes time to get in and out of. So if you're using a suspension trainer like a TRX, there may be some setup time. So it may be more beneficial to do a bigger volume of your set. Like, hey, if I'm going to take all the time to get in this thing, it's better to do 20 as opposed to I have to keep getting in and out and only do 5. So sometimes the consideration how you write the program may do with what equipment you have or what setup there is to do that particular exercise. And then whether rests are included, again, circuits with rests and timed and specific rests basically are then an interval. The other thing that you want to consider is diversity of exercises within a circuit. Maybe you have a lot of equipment that you can be diverse. Maybe you're on vacation and you've got a dumbbell and a foam roller. Or maybe you are overtime at a station that has very minimal equipment. So sometimes you may need to design a circuit all around one or two pieces of equipment, like a dumbbell and a kettlebell. And then there may be periods of time where you have access to a lot of different things. So it's like, hey, I can use a squat rack, I can use a cable machine, I can use a treadmill, right? You can have a lot of variety in those choices as well. So really depends on what environment you're in, what you have at your station, or if you're at a gym outside of work. And again, always leading it back to what are your goals. So program development, generally 10 to 20 exercises, alternating target muscle groups. So whether that be front side of the body, then back side of the body, or whether that be upper, then lower, right? Trying to alternate. So whatever you're working then gets rest on the next set. So if I went from squats to then push-ups, when I'm doing push-ups, my legs can recover before I have to go back to squats. And while I'm doing squats, my arms can recover before I have to go back to doing push-ups. So alternating your exercises is a key piece to having an effective circuit workout. And we always recommend, right, again, that 2-for-1. I want to get some strength capacity, but really trying to get a cardio piece into one of your stations or two of your stations, right? So every round I do a 400-meter run on the treadmill, or every round I do, a minute on the bike. So a really easy way is to incorporate those cardio pieces of equipment that you have at the station into your stations rather than being on it for a prolonged 20-30 minutes. So here's a couple samples, right? So station 1, maybe at each station is 5 minutes. So squat to overhead press, plank with leg raise, and then lunge walks, right? So I could do that for reps, right? 10 reps, 10 reps, 10 reps, and I can do this repeated as many times as I can. Or maybe I do this for time. Or I go for 5 minutes, however many times I get through this is 5, then I move on to my next set of 5-minute station. So you guys can see the alternating from push-up steps to bike to bent over row, right? So this is going to be more upper body. Squat to plank with lunges is going to be more lower body station, but again, the body parts are broken up with a cardio piece. And then, so station 1, it would be lower, station 2 would be upper, station 3 would be upper, station 4 would be, again, an upper body exercise. So if I was going to rewrite this, I would probably make 1 and 4 both lower body focused, and then 2 and 3 are both upper body focused, right? You can see the pivot from the cardio pieces to core. So total body exercise like burpees gets that cardio piece as well as a core piece. And then station 4, we rounded it out with a core piece in the ball crunches. So again, you can kind of see between these 4 a little bit different take on the different ways that you can pivot, right? Cardio piece or core piece. Variables in circuit training requires minimal equipment, right? So that's beneficial, can be done anywhere, right? Body weight all the way to barbells, allows for a better workout in less time, offsets fatigue and improves quality, intensity of the workout, increases intensity and allows for greater fitness benefits. Again, the 2-for-1, 3-for-1, right? We're getting more covered in that training bout of exercise than we would just with like steady state cardio. Improves efficiency of recovery, right? That's again one of those really critical pieces, especially in line with tactical output. We want to be able to see that when stressed, we're able to bring that heart rate back into coherence and continue on our work. Increases anaerobic capacity, right? So that lactic acid threshold, or what we call that redlining, right? We hit that like maximum effort, but we're able to recover and then come back up to that maximal effort, as opposed to hitting that maximal effort and then being in rehab and not being able to repeat that bout of exercise. So important for the repeatability of the effort that we tend to see out on the fire ground. And then increases that lactic acid threshold. So that point at which we hit our tap out, right, will then be elevated. We can go longer before we hit that threshold. High intensity circuit training. So we talked about interval training, we talked about circuit training. So what's high intensity, right? This is now we're really pivoting or focusing on the intensity of the training program itself. So it's a series of exercises, which again can be from body weight to any type of external resistance like a barbell, dumbbell, kettlebell. And it's performed in rapid succession using timed format. So rather than, hey, I've just got this amount of work to do, I have 10 reps at these 5 stations and I'm going to do 3 rounds, we're not concerned with how long that's taking, right? As soon as we start putting a time domain on it, now it becomes high intensity, because then it becomes, can I get through it as fast as possible? So the benefit of that is, number one, for those of us who are on the competitive side of life, gives us something to race against, especially when we're by ourselves, right? Now I have a clock is my competitor. The benefits we tend to see are more metabolic energy systems tapped into. Primarily is going to be our anaerobic system. Again, that without oxygen or those short bursts of effort, while providing moderate strength stimulus at the same time. So again, a lot of times you'll see strength training, weight pieces like dumbbells and kettlebells. So again, 2 for 1, 3 for 1, right? I'm targeting a lot of different pieces with this. So the benefits of high intensity circuit training, right? High intensity circuit training compared to long, slow, steady state pace, right? Metcon or metabolic conditioning is a term that you'll hear kind of interchanged with high intensity interval training or high intensity circuit training. So benefits are going to be, number one, heart rate recovery, right? Caloric cost, we're going to burn more calories in the same amount of time. So 20 minutes of high intensity interval training and 20 minutes of running, you're going to burn more calories in that interval training. Increased resting base metabolic rate. So it's going to drastically increase my resting capacity as well. My lactic acid tolerance, right? So how long I can stay at that like red line threshold, and then also how fast I get there, right? So I'm going to have a greater tolerance for that lactic acid in my system before I tap out. And then lean mass, right? Always come back to the aesthetics as the goal, and it's always definitely a key component into why most people choose this type of training. Generally, if we look at job specificity or tactical application, firefighter job demands are more in line with this type of training, right? Tensions are high, stress is high, the unknown also elevates that stress level, and then we need to pull a hose, we need to exit or enter the building, we need to suppress the fire, we need to search for victims, right? So the job's not done till the job's done, and so we need to be able to go station by station or event by event and continue to move forward, knowing that we have the capacity to do so. So some exercise tips with the high intensity circuit training: do it in short bouts, right? So start with rotations or stations that you know you can handle, and start with small sets until we can work up to more. So generally accumulate up to 30 minutes. More than that, right, the longer the duration, the less intense or less quality the movement is going to be. There are 1,440 minutes in a day. Use 30 of them for physical activity. Again, going back to ACSM and CDC guidelines, right, we want 5 days of 30 minutes of activity or 3 days of 20 minutes at higher intensity, right? So this is going to be like, hey, I can get less number of days I have to work out if I drive that intensity higher. Set your schedule, right? So just like we try and, we have meal time, we have training time, right? Set your time in your day the best you can. If you're off duty, right, you may be able to do that a little better. On duty, right, the hope and the goal is that most departments and most stations have that carved out time in the morning, and then it's how hard or well you protect that as to how consistent you can be. Obviously, calls are going to interrupt, so again, the shorter amount of your workout time, the more likely you're going to complete your workout before getting interrupted by a call. So having the same time every day that you like to work out gives you the consistency. Having that plug and play approach we talked about at the beginning gives you the flexibility to pivot as the job forces you to do so. Gym isn't necessary, right? Don't need a $150 membership, right? You just need a couple pieces of equipment and a general 8x8 space, and you can get a lot of work done. So whether you're at the big station with all the fancy equipment and all the space in the major gym, or you're in a little house in a neighborhood with a squat rack and a tire, right? You can find a good way to get quite a bit of stuff done. And working out in pairs or with groups is always better. Accountability is always the best way to stay consistent. So since you inherently have an internal accountability group within your station, usually we recommend trying to at least recruit one other person to train regularly with you. That way, when you don't want to do it, they're going to show up and go, no, we got to get this done. And then when they're like, oh, I'm really not feeling it, you're going to be like, no, I really want to get this workout done, right? So all tides raise ships. We want to try and encourage each other. And when you're rolling solo, it's usually a little bit harder to do so. So I strongly encourage you to latch someone in, get them tied in with you, make it a family affair, and get everybody training together. Also, a benefit of having stations is very small spaces. If I have 4 people on my crew, we can each be at a station and rotating in tune together rather than trying to cross each other and doing all kinds of crazy different things. So really symbiotic type of training for a crew of 4 or more as well. And then again, going back to pick the exercises you like, choose variety, choose what you like, make sure you're balanced in your front to back, right to left, quad to hamstring, bicep to tricep, chest to back, right? We want to have a balance of those exercises in our program. Tactical relevance, obviously CrossFit style workouts are a little more popular with the military and public safety personnel. Emergency responders rest high physical and mental stress. So it's important that your training replicates that so that your body's more adapt when you're seeing that in the field. And then high intensity circuit training replicates demands of emergency situations as well, which we already talked about. So definitely has a high inline correlation and consistency with the job. So we highly recommend, there's a lot of benefits as to why it's important. Time efficient and variety, right? Intensity equals power output and work time, right? Again, we're hitting all the components that's important for a tactical athlete to have. Workouts are high intensity, power driven. Workouts are short, right? Again, 10, 15 minutes, you're getting a lot of work done. And then the variety, right? Gives you a lot of different flex in terms of what you can do and when and what you're doing on any given day, right? So easy to change and plug in different exercises, easy to flex or change based on environment, right? So overtimes, forces, different stations. Strike team for 2 weeks, right? How are you going to maintain your fitness? Right, cool, we've got a dumbbell and a TRX. We can actually do some work on our downtime. So it's important that you guys have that flexibility while maintaining the consistency. That's the hard balance to have. Prevents boredom, right? The more things we can pick, right, the more fun it's going to be, right? Exercise should be fun. Training should be fun. And then also all of these things help improve our adherence, right? Adherence or the consistency of seeing more days training than not. Minimal equipment, right? So all different kinds of things you can use, bars and plates, right? Those are going to be kind of the most like space exhausting and expensive. So if you have those are great. Squatting racks and chin-up bar or pull-up bar are great as well. But some of your easier, less expensive, and much more compact choices are going to be your kettlebells, dumbbells, sandbags. Literally, you can use rocks and boxes, medicine balls, sleds, a little bit more on that high end or more less likely to see in terms of equipment. But even just cones, plyometrics, right? A line on the ground, things that are easily stored. So it depends on where you're training. Are you training at home? Are you training at the station? What do you have there? What do you have home? And what's worth your investment, right? So what can you get the most out of in terms of investment if you're spending your own dollars? Specifically with CrossFit, we tend to see a lot of this in our industry partners. So the two main kind of formats of a CrossFit style workout is going to be rounds for time or an AMRAP, or as many rounds as possible. So I'm trying to do these 3 rounds. So for example, I'm trying to do 21 of everything, 15 of everything, and 9 of everything as fast as possible, right? So deadlifts, deadlifts and overhead squats. So I'm going to do 21 deadlifts, 21 overhead squats, 15 deadlifts, 15 overhead squats, 9 deadlifts, 9 overhead squats. And we're going to talk about the safety of that in a minute, but the idea or the flow is that we do those set movements, those set number of reps, and as fast as you can go. AMRAP is going to be, I have a list of things, I'm going to do as many rounds of that list as I can in a set amount of time, right? This could be 2 minutes, this could be 10 minutes, depends on how fast I go. This is a set time of 10 minutes, and it's going to be 15 box jumps, 12 push press, and 9 toes to bar, as many rounds in, or I guess this example is 18 minutes, right? So I may get, if this takes me 2 minutes to get through these exercises, then I may get 9 rounds, right? Now, the beauty of this is the first round may take me 2 minutes, but as I get fatigued, those rounds will maybe take longer and longer. So the goal is, hey, if I can do this in 2 minutes, can I maintain a 2-minute pace and shoot for 9 rounds? It's like, oh, I got to about 5 rounds and I petered out and I lost energy, and now I only ended up getting 7 rounds because I lost conditioning. The benefit of these is I could then take this same workout for this same time domain, and let's say the first time I did it, I only got 5 rounds. But in 3 months when I came back, I then got 7. So all things being the same, I know my fitness has improved because I can do more work in the same amount of time. Key piece with anything that involves, if we go back to this exercise, right, deadlifts and overhead squats, those are very dependent upon core strength, right? So in order to be able to do that workout effectively, the really key piece is keeping intrathoracic pressure during structural lifts. So the detriment or the risk in doing loaded barbell movements during, or structural lifts during these type of high intensity circuit training is the loss of that vertebral spine, right? So we don't want to see a loss of neutral spine. We want to maintain those spinal columns or those vertebrae stacked on top of each other so that we can maintain and support and protect the back. So potential problems generally is maintaining inner abdominal pressure, right? So putting tension, oftentimes that's why you'll see people wear weight belts, gives you a cue as to increase tension into that belt during those high intensity circuit training exercises. So it's always important that you err on the side of good movement before the competitive nature of I have to get this done faster. Traditional Olympic lift approach, generally 5 reps or less, right? So if you're like, hey, let's do 50 of clean and jerk and it's 200 pounds, right? Probably not a good idea. Now, if I'm going to do 50 clean and jerks and it's 95 pounds, that's a little different story. So the load and the reps need to align with making sure that you can maintain that correct inner abdominal pressure to keep that back safe. So in that lifting position, again, we want to maintain that neutral spine. What we're wanting to do is keep those discs stacked on top of each other. What we don't want to see is that collapse of the spine to where we're now putting pressure on those discs. So how to design an effective high-intensity circuit training workout. A lot of those are going to be very similar to all the strategies and tactics we use in circuit training and in interval training, right? Using exercises appropriate for your fitness level, right? Now, it may be an exercise that's appropriate, but is the load appropriate? Yeah, I can do deadlifts, but should you use dumbbells instead of a barbell? Also need to think about specifically, if it's an on-duty workout, what is the aftermath or the outcome of the end of that workout, right? If I'm going so hard that if I get a call at the end of that workout, I can't physically go do my job, then that intensity is too high. So we need to make sure that it's not only appropriate for our fitness level, but it's appropriate for our environment, right? My environment being I'm off duty and I'm at home, or I'm on duty, we're at a busy station, and we're most likely going to get a call right after we work out. Using simple equipment, using basic movements, right? Alternating movements and muscle groups, lower body, trunk, torso, upper body, or what I would call total body. And then using relay race format, right? So like this, then this, then this, then this, then done. Sometimes in partner workouts, we like to do a you go, I go. So we may have that 21-15-9 deadlift and overhead press, but I'll do deadlifts and then I wait till you do your deadlifts. And then I do my overhead press, then I wait till you do your overhead press. So there's a kind of an internal rest in set with that, and we're as a team trying to go as fast as we can. So teams are always a good way to kind of moderate that intensity a little bit, especially if you're on duty. So ultimately, whether you choose circuit training, whether you choose high intensity interval training, whether you choose high intensity circuit training, right? Knowing stations, how many stations do I have? Do I have a work and a rest, or am I just going station to station? Ultimately, it always comes back to what is my goal? What do I want to do? Why? And once I have those questions answered, then the question is, how do I get there? Number one, and the first thing we have to do is make a commitment to be consistent in that training. The more consistent we are, the less likely we are to get injured. The more consistent we are, right, within that flexibility approach to pick and choose when those workouts are happening, right, we're going to have a happier and longer career, and ultimately it's always about getting you to retirement. Thank you for your time. Hope you've enjoyed this session on high intensity circuit training, and interval training. And as always, if you have questions, you can reach out to us at Santa Ana College Fire Technology Department. And my email's up here, leafblad_robin@sac.edu. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you and help you out with your journey to fitness.